welcome to the ones that showed up this afternoon, at least in EMEA, in Europe. Myself, Joachim from Paxia, partnering very much with Cybertech, and Raj from Cybertech. Myself is based in Stockholm, Sweden. And this webinar, we have joint webinars every second month. And this is the second time we have now around compliance that we penetrate the bank and financial industry with. So I'm happy to have you here, Raj, today. And I just want to, you can go ahead and introduce yourself when I hand over to you, Raj. Just wanted to say that we do this because it's a great opportunity for organizations itself, meaning within bank and financial industry. We believe that it's a competitive advantage to turn compliance not from a burden into an advantage. And it's very much about processes. But what we will talk about here as well is how you can, with more modern solutions, support the processes that you put in place in order to be compliant. So it's not the burden, and you turn it into a business advantage. And I thought of sharing a couple of pages. I talk freely about two banking cases in the Nordic. One that is seen as the largest compliance case actually globally, and it's from Denmark. Mm-hmm. And this was several things. But if you think of Danske Bank, they have close to €500 million in assets, and they had to pay 2 billion in fines due to a lot of issues they had here in the Nordics region primary. And this was creating, of course, a big damage that, it took just many years for Danske Bank to get back on track with, trust in the B2B world and, of course, consumer world. So it's a huge, except of, just the fines, the bigger problem is really reputation, and you have to repair the trust. And you probably, the executive, more than one have to go, and you need to change people and so on. So it's really costly, time consuming if you don't treat this, seriously and have, compliance into your design. And make a burden and make it easier. And that is what you, Raj, will talk about here today. I also want to mention another bank here in the Nordics, and that is in the country where I live in Sweden. And one of the top banks here was in the Nordics, actually size-wise, but it's a Swedbank. And they have a huge asset bank as well, or, a lot of money in their assets. And they had a not equally big fine, but it was kind of like 25% of the size. So it's close to half billion euros that they had in fine as well. And it was several things. And I will send this in the presentation to the guys that attend, to the guys that have registered. But it caused a lot of again, except from the fine, the damage with the reputation and all other things. The CEO here got into jail after some years because it was really, it was really some major and serious breaks. So this is of course for big banks like this, it's more noise and so on, but it's really something that we feel that we can help organizations with in a new way that has not been seen again. These regulations and so on, they kind of just get updated, new ones comes and so on. So the key is to stay compliant, and you, Raj, will talk about how you are able to do that. And our solution or our answer to it is to be continuous compliance. So Raj, I'll hand over to you, and you can talk about what you do at Cybertech and where you are based.
Well, thank you very much. Great introduction. First of all, a very warm welcome to the people who've joined, who've taken time to join this webinar. Thank you very much for the attendance. I do see there's a bit of a attraction which we can work with to engage more. But yes, I will try to make sure that your time spent on this webinar is worth it and try to add value here. Um, I am the COO at Cybertech. I have 20 plus years of database technology experience, and I make things happen at Cybertech is what I do. But that's more than enough for the introduction. I will move on to the important topic, which is from chaos to compliance. Now, the reason we're holding this webinar is to make sure to create an understanding and trust and confidence in open source products, especially Postgres. And compliance is 99% of the times is process and controls and just risk management. It's not about the software that you're using. So the idea is that people who are moving from closed source to open source, there tends to be a gap in confidence and trust. And also translating compliance from one environment or platform over to the open source or the new environment is definitely a pain for companies. Um, I want to shed some light onto those topics, those areas, how you can mitigate the risks. So I've added bits and bytes for everybody here, business people, engineers. You would definitely get something out of this, like a cheat sheet, what to be aware of if you're auditing compliance environment our environments, what to keep in mind, and how it can act like a handbook or cheat sheet if you follow the process and the guidelines. It's super easy. Postgres has most of the feature sets built in that you need to be able to comply, and we're going to talk a bit about those. But first, just a little bit about Cybertech. I hope everybody's able to see the screen and the next slides. Is it visible? Everything
Yes.
okay with the slides? Okay, great. So we're a global company. We are doing worldwide operations for some of the major European transport, finance, stock exchange, etc. And we do provide Postgres support, consulting, training um, across platforms and support around the clock. So there are much more things that we do in terms of products and services, but I'm going to focus on the compliance topic today. So, uh, the reason why I named it chaos to compliance is it definitely looks or appears like chaos when you're dealing with compliance for the first time, especially. And we're going to check some boxes on what are the commonalities and try to kind of go in depth. How do you navigate through those complexities in order to achieve those compliances? So again, why does it matter? Because if you're working in an industry, which is, let's say, customer focused, which is if you're doing, let's say, payments gateway, if you are in healthcare, if you're a if you're dealing with credit card, there are different kinds of compliances. And if you're not dealing with any of those, if you're just a SaaS company, you said you're providing software as a service or some kind of platform, you would have to deal with this compliance now or sometime in near future as you grow. And the most basic version is ISO, which is like a standard practice for service providers to follow. These are different types of compliances that exist. These are not all of them. This is maybe some of them listed here. And I tried to add compliances from various different industries: PCI, ISO, GDPR, that's European. I'm pretty sure you must have heard of part of PCI, that's cards compliances, payments and cards. So SOX, this is again, many of the organizations in the US have to deal with this compliance when they're focused on, let's say, financial transaction, credit cards, or customer data. DORA, again, one of those compliances in the European region that companies have to follow, especially financial institutes, stock exchange, etc. Now, we're gonna take a look at some of the real world patterns, how what are the requirements. In compliance world, they call them controls. If you have sat in an audit or with an auditor or have been a part of the compliance audits, they would talk in terms of they would talk about these regulation in terms of controls, control number this, that, etc., etc. So commonality we'll discuss in a bit, but this is what it looks like from PCI side. Depending upon how many transactions you're processing, you're categorized or leveled, and depending upon your levels, you would have to comply to controls, which means basically rules or risks you would have to mitigate. So if you're at the lower level, which is 4, you would have to comply to less number of controls, and the granularity increases as you go in. Similarly, for GDPR, there are very strict standards there, making sure you have retention across data. If you are retaining customer data for a certain time, you would have to make sure that you also get rid of it. A very simple basic example is if you're working in the Europe and you're processing CVs, let's say for interviews for your company, you would have to ensure and have processes that those CVs or the person's data is deleted, and they know that this has happened. So the notification has to go back and forth. So this is important. This is just one very basic example of GDPR. There are many more, but we got a lot of things to cover. So I'll just skip through the slides here. HIPAA, again, this is healthcare systems. If you are in that industry, this is a 10,000 feet overview of how HIPAA works, how the rules apply, what kind of controls and processes you have to make sure that you're HIPAA compliant. SOX, this has been my personal experience, and depending upon the size of your company, these compliance audits can be really, really big. It can take from days, weeks, months, and sometimes bigger organization audits even go on for a year. So a lot of planning, a lot of ramification needed, and if you're non-compliant, this could directly affect your company's stocks if you're a public company, for example. So this is something that Joachim was talking about at the beginning. Now, we saw some of the examples, and compliance can really be, it can be really complex and scary to achieve, but in reality, it is just about understanding, identifying, and being aware that that there are risks, and mitigating these risks is the key. And in the end, if you put it simply, it's just risk management. And as I said before, it is never about the software you use, but it's all about how you achieve those controls to tick those boxes in those compliance. And the bigger picture is you want to ensure your customer data is secure. That's the end goal. That should be the focus all the time. Because obviously, assume you have an account on social media, you don't want your data to be leaked. So these compliances paint that picture for the bigger good or the benefit of the customers. Some of the commonalities across compliances are these. Again, we won't have time in the webinar to go through each one of them in detail. I would try to touch base on them and how Postgres comes into picture. When you use Postgres, which is saving millions of bucks on licensing, these things are the commonalities across compliances that you would have to achieve, and Postgres could really help you achieve those. So we're turning into the zone of how do we turn this chaos into compliance. So first and the most important things across all the compliances is identity and access management. Postgres does provide extensions, features that are available out of the box, which help you do that. So let's take a look. Restricted access, this is very important. How do you achieve this? Well, there are settings in HBA-Conf, and you could tune those settings. You can make sure those are correctly configured in order to meet those or check those boxes. And some of the examples are listed here. You could ensure that nobody comes in if they have no SSL. You could enforce that. And again, at the bottom, the 10th point you see here is blocking everything except for the specifically identified application endpoint, application servers, or IP addresses. You could do that. So the listen addresses takes care of that. And one of the mistakes that people do is just open it for all. And now we're going to take a look at what could be the pitfalls sometimes. When you're dealing with Postgres security or access, Unix socket is important, which means if you have Postgres installed on the server and somebody has access to the server, that is the risk that you need to really mitigate. So you want to ensure that this is taken care of through role-based access and systems. So you have well-defined groups and users that take care of it. And in the end, you have the Unix socket kind of secured where not everybody who logs onto that server has access to Postgres locally. This is one of those things that I've seen many times across when people are building up their systems. Obviously, it's okay to do this in POC, but when you're moving your environment towards a more matured environment towards production, let's say, it's really important to focus on those role-based access systems. So make sure you have dedicated roles for every service or application and restrict the super user access by default. And probably if you have to use it, use a password manager of some sort so you can track the entire trail who accessed the system with boot. This is important. This is fundamental. You have an application team now. You would have maybe 5 or 10 application teams later on, and bigger. So there is a structure that you want to follow, a method that you want to follow, a permission scheme that you want to follow. This is something that is already there, and basically we focus on establishing secure and consistent access control standards here in Postgres using alter default privileges. This makes sure that the newly created databases, they automatically follow the security policies that you've configured or in your processes or in your controls that you stated, instead of relying on manual permission assignment. And if you don't standardize this, developers or application may unintentionally expose the data. Access controls become inconsistent across the schemas and environments, which you want to avoid at any cost, because as you scale, this is super important and it gets out of hand really quickly, as you can see with the permissions diagram on the right here. Another thing is the security remediation is always manual if you don't take care of this to begin with, which is definitely error prone when you give this over to humans every single time you're trying to rectify it. So automating it, setting a standard in the beginning is important. Encryption at disk at rest is super important. It's part of the most of the compliances which need it. We do have our proprietary product, which is basically a wrapper on the vanilla Postgres. So if you want this feature, if this is a compliance requirement, you can reach out to Cybertech. We can help you out with this particular feature. So PGEE offers this. The key management part of this, which helps you with the encryption at disk, is abstracted. What does that mean? You could use different options to store this key and secure this key, and you would have encryption at rest. What does this mean when you have it? Well, first of all, this is how the data looks like when you create a table, insert data. You could read it, right? That's what I'm trying to show with this example. So you're taking a hex dump, and in the next picture, it's basically using PGEE with encryption. The data is basically encrypted and stored in this way if you do the hex dump for the same. This, although, does not give you security from theft, obviously. So if you would have to ensure the way you're storing your keys is important. If you're using the same hard drive or the same place where you're storing your data, it's not a good practice. So it's definitely not fail-proof. This is one of those things that you have to mitigate in terms of risk. There is another one, which is taking a dump. This is the logical backup side of Postgres. And when you do that, you obviously are able to do that because you are able to access the system, you're able to take a dump. Yeah, so there is no safety from logical backups when you follow this. Disk encryption protects against physical storage compromises. Tools like these would allow you to take a dump and get the data. Now, moving on, there is another extension which helps you to encrypt your data. Let's say you're in the payments and cards compliance industry. You would want to make sure that not everybody can see the card information. So this is something that you can use. This is just one example. There could be many other examples, but you can see at line number 5, select from cards. You cannot read the card number. And to read the card number, you basically have to provide the secret key, and then you get the card information. What is the risk here? Well, if you log all the statements, it would definitely log the statement that you're running when you're inserting the data. So your key and your data is visible in the log. So that's something that is really important when you have some kind of a pipeline for observability or telemetry. Be aware of this. Make sure this is not allowed. Again, set a standard for disallowing all those statements. Moving on, stat activity is also one of those things where when the query is running, you could see what's going on, and this can be taken care of by allowing certain views that you can access or restricting permissions there. So that's important. Role level security is also one of those requirements or controls that people like to have a checkbox on when they're dealing with compliance. And this is a straightforward, simple statement that helps you with RLS. Now, what's the caveat? The very important point is there are a couple of roles that you want to avoid or audit, let's say, which allow you to bypass that. So if you have those two roles, even with the role level security, they can bypass that and they can read the data. To mitigate this, you want to make sure force role level security is the option that helps you to mitigate that. So it basically allows you to force role level security on the roles that can bypass them by default. So that's an important bit there. Again, in the end, when we talk about encryption or security or data encryption, at rest, row level security of column, it's best if you do it at application layer. It's really, really important because when it comes to sensitive data, encryption is critical. Always keep a primary key. This is something that developers forget when they're doing this at the application end. Always keep the primary key column in plain text or something that can be indexed, not plain text, but and it's essential for querying, joining, and indexing. So that's something to make a note of. This is what I've personally observed many a times. People forget, when I say people, developers and teams, when they're dealing with card applications, they tend to collect this. This is very important. It's a red flag. You could be fined heavily if you're doing this. Never allow storing CVV number when it comes to cards and payments. Network security, data in transit. Not a network guy, but I will touch base on certain things that could help you achieve this. Postgres out of the box does provide that if you've seen this, and you could limit IPs, and this is how the SSL protocol works. There is key value pair, public-private, stored. You have the certificate authorities showing it, and it helps you with some of the attacks, which is eavesdropping and man-in-the-middle. Now, depending upon what mode of SSL you choose, there are overheads versus benefits. So there's a really, really good talk by Lawrence on some of the security attack side of Postgres. I would strongly recommend you take a look at that for sure. So the link is there, and there's a YouTube video as well for this. These are the modes we were talking about. And in the end, the idea is to reduce the attack surface. So, and that helps you kind of mitigate risks from network security perspective. Then we go on to the auditing. So now you have controls, everything is streamlined, you've standardized your stuff. You want to make sure you're able to audit it because it's not just about putting controls in place. You also want to verify continuously. So there's continuous improvement needed as the system changes or you interact with different application and services. So it's really important piece of it's a part of compliance requirement that you audit the necessary controls established in your organization for database infrastructure or any other platform. What does that mean? Well, tracking activities. There are different solutions for this. We do have CyberTech audit, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But PG audit, that's a standard audit. PG permission is something that's maintained by CyberTech. It's open source. You can use it freely. It fits into very good use cases where you're trying to audit, where you SOC team or security team, whatever you call it in your organization, they would want audit trails, current state versus previous state, and they want to compare it. And if there are any risks or abnormalities there, they would want you to mitigate that. So this really caters to that case, and it's absolutely free. This is how you kind of implement it. So you define the ideal world, you compare it to the reality, which is the current state, and then you automate compliance. So it's basically helps you enhance the security or the controls that you've applied for your database infrastructure. So you can see this is the current state. These are the permissions for the users, and it gives you a bunch of functions internally that you can query and then audit your database systems. The SPG permissions. So again, the important thing, the takeaway from this is over a period of time, schemas evolve and permissions kind of drift away from intended security model that you have defined for a company. The important idea or the approach is to define the ideal world, compare it with the reality, and automate or remediate whatever is missing or does not fit the controls of your system. All right, and the CyberTech audit is one of those things, proprietary things that we develop in-house. This allows you, this is very, very efficient in the way it audits your system. Imagine you have systems where you're coming from Oracle SQL Server to Postgres. It kind of creates a panic situation for organizations that how do we audit the new systems immediately? This kind of fits into that gap and helps you audit systems when you're transitioning from one database platform over to Postgres. So this really fits into that use case where you don't have to spend a lot of engineering development effort in order to audit your database system while you're migrating from the current system over to Postgres. One of the key parts is, again, SIEM. I'm not sure if everybody has heard of this, but this is a crucial part of an overall security operations or security systems in your organization. You would have to do incident response, and there's a tool that I just want to call out, that's Wazoo. They have a lot of decoders which help audit the Postgres data, and then depending upon the conditions that you've set, you can create alerts or set up alerts, and you could respond to those incidents accordingly, depending upon what SLAs you have on what kind of conditions. So if somebody's creating a database, somebody's deleting database, you want to audit that, that is definitely possible. So this is, again, I consider that as an infrastructure problem. You can solve this by plugging Wazoo in your infrastructure, and it can do the incident response. So you can have a holistic overview. Again, this software is absolutely free of cost. And could be integrated into current systems. So if you, again, go for PGEE or our platform, infrastructure platform, which is Scalefield or Scalefield Secure, you could also plug that into there and kind of have incident response available right from day one. This is pretty streamlined when it comes to Postgres. Major, minor release, very clear roadmap. When you got issues, you can follow the hackers list, or there are specific DLs which you could follow, and they do give you updates there, and yeah, it's a very clearly defined roadmap when it comes to Postgres. Generally, I've seen people following compliance. They have a certain roadmap internally defined, which is you don't go on the latest version right away. So you have like N-1 or N-2 when it comes to major release. And when you're moving this way, a clear roadmap really helps you navigate or make decisions for the future, which version you'll be sitting on and what it would look like. This is, again, supported by CyberTech. When you are in a doubt, you need consulting, architecture, or support, we always help you streamline that. So those are some of the services that we provide to support you in your Postgres journey. This is the platform that I was talking about. So it's a basic 3-layer system. It gives you the functionality of plug in, plug out any database infrastructure that you currently have, and collect the logs, put the logs into Postgres, and then you could crunch the data and kind of make BI reports and do meaningful decisions based on that. So while you're migrating or you're moving away from a closed source or licensed software or to Postgres, this is an entire end-to-end platform that helps you with your Postgres journey. I have created a cheat sheet for you guys. It's like a 10,000 feet overview, but this is the commonality. And Joachim will be sharing the slides with everyone later after this webinar, right?
Yes.
So this would help you. I would love to hear from you guys if you guys have any question. I do understand the audience is limited here, but if you want to share this with everybody out there, I would love to hear what kind of challenges people face in their current environment if you're using Postgres, or your journey moving from a closed source to open source. In the end, the idea is turning this into a real advantage instead of bottleneck, for sure. In my opinion, compliance just feels like chaos, but when you do it right, it is a real value, and you can substantialize on that value. Again, we want to make sure we empower people, move away from vendor lock-ins. You don't want to build a future where somebody else is calling the shots. When you're doing this Postgres way, you can decide and you can navigate your database journey or product development or your infrastructure platform inside a company. So super important. We're in super support for digital independence and digital sovereignty here. So that's a little bit from my side. That's all I have to say about the compliance journey. And don't be scared. Don't be afraid. If you have any questions, always reach out. Cybertech is really open and helping out with compliance journeys, or if you just want to have Postgres as an option in your infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raj, very much. And I just thought of your cheat sheet there. Thanks. That's a good one to have in your pocket.